welcome to Tabletop Tommies, episode 11. I'm Jonny.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Alex.
Today, we are joined by Alex to talk about the armies of Imperial Japan. Alex is a very good player. He won the Welsh Nationals in 2022. He was the highest ranked Axis player at the English Nationals that year as well. And he won Beachhead, which you will have heard Mike Smith talking about. He won that tournament in 2023. And he also went to the World Team Championship in 2023.
Impressive year this year.
Been a busy year for you, yeah.
And it hasn't stopped since then.
No. Well, I did hear you came first on your team. Is that true?
No. I think I came second or third. I know we're all pretty even out in Spain. But team effort. We didn't actually lose as a team. A couple of draws and 4 wins. So as a team, I think we did outstanding. It was our first year together.
Mm-hmm. Overall, Alex, England finished where this year?
We finished third.
Very good.
Nice. Yeah, I misunderstood that. It was the first team you were playing for. Is that right?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So, wealth of experience there. Do you always play Japanese? So at all these events I've just said, were you playing Japanese for them, or do you like to mix it up with other nations?
See, my go-to army has always been Germany. I think like most players, when you get into the game, you go with the coolness factor first. And to me, Germany has always been the cool factor. They've got all the toys, all the toys you could ever want. But my go-to competitive army is Japan. Someone has to be the bad guys, and in my opinion, they're the best of the bad guys.
Brilliant. Well, I look forward to finding out why they're the best. Was there anything you wanted to talk about, or should we jump straight into the selections that you think players should be making when we play Japanese?
Let's dive straight in.
Brilliant. Well, I think, Phil, would you be kind enough to summarise the national characteristics?
Yeah, no problem at all. So with the Japanese, you've got 4 army special rules. So the first one then is death before dishonor. And what this means is that every unit has the fanatic special rule, as described in the main bolt action rulebook. And in addition, infantry and artillery units automatically pass morale checks for being assaulted by enemy tanks. However, artillery pieces are still destroyed as normal.
Nice.
Okay. Second one is Banzai charge. And for this one, then, if a Japanese infantry unit is ordered to run towards or charge the closest visible enemy, any order test for that move is automatically passed, and that means you take off the pin for that. All models in the unit must then be moved directly towards one of the models in the target unit and must make contact with the target unit if possible. Note that a unit can be ordered to run or charge in another direction, but in that case, it will follow the normal rules and the Banzai charge rule has no effect. Third one is ambush tactics. And for this one, during setup, any Japanese unit starting the game hidden, as described in the main bolt action rulebook, may start the game already in ambush. If you decide to do so, you need to take one of your order dice out of the bag and place it next to the unit in ambush. And then the final one is show your loyalty. It's quite specific, this one, to a couple of units. So a Kemputai officer doesn't confer any morale bonus to nearby troops, but what it does do is it's useful in stealing the nerve of untried units, such as militia. So if a green friendly Japanese unit within 6 inches of the Kemputai officer rolls for its green special rule, the player may re-roll the result.
Very nice. Which is your favourite, Alex?
I think the go-to death before dishonor is the main one in the Japanese army, and the thing that they're known for alongside Banzai the most. I think the most underutilized and unknown is definitely ambush tactics. Being able to deploy in ambush, and I'm sure when we get to talking about big guns, we'll cover it again, but being able to deploy in ambush and hidden at the start of the game is actually quite big sometimes. I feel like hidden as a rule in the game is quite underutilized. Yeah, deploying in cover on ambush at the start of the game. When we look at forward deployers, you can get some nice little forward deploying units as well. Just setting up ready to go is quite sneaky from Japan.
Yeah, I didn't even know that rule existed, to be honest, because I don't remember seeing people use it against me, the ambush. I suppose it's probably just because they're hidden so rarely used.
Yeah, I find a lot of people forget that hidden is a rule they can do. And all you have to do is deploy in cover. So quite often you'll find when you're deploying, actually most of your army could deploy hidden if you wanted to.
I've certainly noticed, Alex, we've played a few times recently, and it is something that you do a lot of, obviously because you are well aware of what the national special rules are for the Japanese. But it's definitely not something that I see when I'm playing maybe other Japanese players, or indeed just players generally where you can use hidden as part of setup, but it's just not getting used that very often.
No. And I think ambush is a rule that as new players, you don't tend to see the benefit of ambush. And the more experience you get, the more you see actually ambush is a really big tool that can be used in your gameplay. So the two of them tying together with Japan, I think is, underrated special rule.
Now, before we jump into the different units and so on, Alex, just tell us a few things about why the Japanese appeal to you as an army in bolt action, and also some of the more common ways that you may see it being played and lists being built by Japanese players.
To me, the draw of Japan is, at its heart, it's an infantry army. And you quite often hear this, again, when you hear people being taught about bolt action, we say it's an infantry game, it's all about infantry. And then we all get excited and say, yeah, but I'm going to have a Tiger. I'm going to have a Tiger 1, I'm going to have a Sherman, I'm going to have all these cool big toys. And they are cool and they are fun. But at the heart of the game, you win games with boots on the floor. Mm-hmm. And Japan as a nation, they got lots of cheap, resilient boots on the floor. Whether they're veteran, inexperienced, regular, whatever level, that free fanatic on everything on your army makes any troop you pick, it's going to stick around. Mm-hmm. It's not going to run away like any other army. And I think that's their big draw for me. And that kind of ties into their builds as well. So you have the notorious Bamboo Horde, mm-hmm. which personally I think is the most boring of all the Japanese armies. It's very one-dimensional. They've got sticks, they don't have guns, they run at you. If you're playing against it, you know what's going to happen. They're going to run at you, and you're either going to kill them or they're going to kill you. Mm-hmm. And that's it, simple as that. For me, the middle ground, and I'll talk about them a bit more later, is looking at militia squads, the armed equivalent. And that's where I think it starts to get more interesting. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We then have the proper middle ground, so your large squads of regular troops, and you often see these with loads of light mortars scattered through them, because that's another thing that the Japanese do that's similar to the French. You get lots of light mortars, and you can put them in your squads. Mm-hmm. So there's that middle ground where they're kind of that I'm going for cost, but then I'm bumping up that cheaper unit with some extra tools. Or just making up with it with numbers. That's another thing Japan does is the big 15-man squads. Again, not a typical thing you see in the game. Most people play around with 8 to 10-man squads, and that's it. So you've got half a unit added on extra. Is massive. Quite often, those kind of lists backed up, but lots of HE, lots of indirect fire. And I think that's quite a typical Japanese thing you'll see, whichever kind of list you do. And then the third kind, and my preferred preferse, a bit like Phil, is the veteran units. If you're going to take an army that doesn't run away, you might as well make an army that's really tough on top of not running away. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely been what I mean. I've only played 6 or 7 games so far with Japanese, but I've definitely leaned into the veteran squads, backed up with the HE, and that's kind of how I generally play bolt action in terms of taking veteran squads, whether or not it's Japanese or other armies. Certainly not looking at the inexperienced Bamboo Horde. But I'm glad you mentioned the militia, and obviously we'll talk about that in a bit when we get to it.
Yeah, I'd be going the other way. I'd be playing with the Horde army, because having Fanatic on everything is incredible. Like when I play Brits, the reason I take the Gurkhas is just to stop you charging, because close quarters in bolt action so swingy and can go against you so easily that if I could have free Fanatic on everything, I'd be absolutely delighted. And I nearly started a Japanese army just for that. And now with that FAQ perk, it's incredible, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah. Really, really tough to kill. I know myself and Jonny played recently at the Welsh Nationals. And the frustration that he was having to throw two, 3 flamethrowers in at a time to kill my squads, because he actually had to kill them and not just scare them away with his flame guns.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, when we talked about that, and I committed 1 flamethrower against your first squad thinking that'll do, and then killed 1 man and realised the error of my ways. Do the tanks get Fanatic?
They don't. You lose Fanatic when you get down to your last model. So a tank being a single unit, no fanatic for them.
Yeah, the rulebook like talks about it in terms of men. That's why I was a little bit confused by it, because it says when it gets down to the last man, as long as it includes at least 2 men. And I'm like, well, the tank crew has 3 usually.
Yeah, I'm not off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure there's interactions that say it's a no-go.
Yeah, that'd be very good, wouldn't it, having flame-proof tanks?
It would be. Japan's not particularly known for having the best tanks, though, so I don't know if that would tempt me into playing them more.
They're cheap, though, aren't they?
They are, yes. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, on to HQ section. Anything of note?
They're your standard Axis HQ, regular veteran. You can take them with a sword and make them tough fighter, but given that their guns are free to upgrade anyway, you could get a tough fighter from your SMG, just like any other HQ unit. The one thing to note is if you have a cavalry unit that are mounted on horses, you can mount your officers. I believe it's been FAQ ad rata that every army can do this, but worth note, in Japan, you can then take a cheeky little 3-man veteran cavalry, tough fighting, fanatic unit as your officer.
Nice.
I've played against it, and it's actually quite scary to see that little infantry unit that is just going to chew through something that's not a substantial unit itself.
Just hunting mortar squads.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, they can sneak into your backline really quickly and become a problem. So
there's a lovely warlord model, isn't there, of the Japanese general on the horse as well?
Yes, Baron Nishi.
That's the one. Yeah,
Olympic horse rider turned cavalryman.
Okay. Interesting fact.
And later tank commander.
There we go. Cool. Anything else, Alex, in the HQ section worth mentioning? We briefly touched on the Kemper as part of the national rules. Is it worth just expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah, there's your Kemper, and I think if you are going that inexperienced force, they're worth it. They give you a reroll on your green check, and I think statistically it takes it up to something like a 66% chance you're going to be regular. So it's definitely worth it if you're going that horde army. They are a single model. You can buy extra guys for them. They're inexperienced. They're not hard to kill. So you'll see it as a trend in Japan. It's one of those cheap dice they can get to bump up that number of dice pools, which isn't necessarily bad in the way Japan plays, but they are a little bit fragile and you have to be careful.
Brilliant.
But they lead quite nicely into my first unit of infantry of note, I think, which is the militia squad. They play exactly like your bamboo. If you want to run at something, you can run at something. It's a 15-man squad. It's really cheap. They're inexperienced, but they got rifles and they're green.
Ooh.
So if one dies and you've been spamming them, you've got a regular squad. And especially if you've taken that Genpei like we mentioned, the chances of it becoming regular is quite high.
5/9, I think it is.
Quick maths, but that's good odds.
That might be wrong.
And if you spammed maybe 4 or 5 units of these, if you're looking at maybe 3 of them becoming regular, that's massive. And again, 15-man squad regular with rifles, that's a lot of shots.
Yeah, that is a lot. Yeah. And it's not something they're famous for.
It's not, no. And they still have that fear of bamboo spearmen, that you've got those guns, but you can still charge a unit. If a unit comes in front of you and thinks, well, I can win that gunfight, you just charge them.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Just looking at the unit cost. So you're paying 5 points per man for a bamboo spear fighter, unarmed, inexperienced, green, and you're only paying 7 points for the same with a rifle. And obviously that will add up, if depending on how many you've got in a squad and how many squads you take. But that ability to be able to shoot as you're, getting closer to the enemy and then still assault as effectively as an unarmed, bamboo spear fighter, it's a no-brainer if the points are there in the list, I would say.
It does, and it starts to let you play the game on multiple levels. You don't just have to be that aggressive player. You can sit back in cover and say, right, I'm a squad of 15 guys with rifles. You will do close combat if you want to do it, but I'm quite happy to shoot you at range as well.
Yeah, because there are times you get whittled down enough that someone's Gurkhas, they've got the odds on you. So having the rifle so you can shoot them on the way in can swing it back your way, I think.
Oh, definitely. You sit a militia unit on ambush, even if they're inexperienced, sit them on ambush and cover. Those Gurkhas really have to think, do I want to charge that squad? Because they're going to shoot me loads on the way in, and then we go at the same time. And yeah, I'll kill loads of them, but I'm worth a lot more points-wise. And there's probably not that many Gurkha units compared to the number of militia squads you can put on the table.
Sure.
How many are you running generally?
For me, I tend to run 1, maybe 2.
Okay.
If I play them as backline holders, outflankers, those cheeky little squads that I've kind of maybe had to cut down on points, but they're still a threat if left unattended.
Just looking at the other infantry units that are available, Alex, one of the things we often hear about the Japanese is you don't have a huge number of units to choose from, especially when you compare it to, the Germans and the generic platoon, or Soviets, for example, or British. They're quite limited in the different combinations. How much of a problem is that, do you find?
A lot of it is variety for namesake. So you've got the IGA squads, you've got your paratroopers, you've got your IGN, the naval squads. They all end up becoming quite similar.
Okay.
And it's just units for different roles within their respective military forces, which lets you build the army you want to build at the level you want to build, but have it represent a historical force that you want to represent, which to me is fine. A lot of the games you're quite happy with just guys with rifles.
Yeah.
And you have lots of choice of different names of guys with rifles.
Yeah.
The only big one of note is the Grenadier squads, which can take light mortars. You will quickly find your cheap large squad becomes a expensive large squad. When you've given them all the knee mortars you can. It's almost like a cheap Death Star. All your eggs in one basket and just hope you roll those lucky sixes.
Yeah.
What do you think of the knee mortar? Is it competitive? Is it competitive enough, or is it only for thematic play?
I think it can be competitive. You've got the option of 3 indirect shots that you can put on 3 different units, and then the rest of your squad can shoot a 4th. So depending on how lucky you are with your dice rolls, you could potentially put pins on 4 units with one of your own. So it can be lucky. It depends if you want to invest the points on running on luck.
25 points to knee mortar, is it?
It is indeed. So 75 points to...
It's quite a lot to be rolling, like hoping for a 6, and then when you get it, you only get a 1-inch splash. Because Phil and I had that discussion about medium versus heavy mortar, and I argued that actually even a 2-inch splash isn't big enough to be sort of hoping for a 6 to get. And so... I mean, I've ran the little light mortars with the French, and I do find myself mainly using them for smoke.
The thing with Japan is when you look at it in comparisons, okay, you could get 3 light mortars or you could get 15 spearmen. And there's always that question of, do I think those 3 shots are worth 15 more pairs of boots on the floor?
I'd take the spearmen.
Yeah, it's almost a no-brainer.
Yeah,
100%.
Very, very good point. When you actually look at it in terms of cost per models, yeah, I understand why you would take light mortars, but if you're trying to max out your efficiency in the available points and work within the restrictions of the event and that sort of thing, I can't see them being that competitive unless you're really going to lean into it.
I think if you take a big squad, a single big squad with 3 light mortars, invest some points and sit mid-table, it can be quite effective. It gets some nice cover. It can actually reach out and touch quite a lot of the table. And I think that's quite a Japanese way of doing things, getting big resilient squads somewhere where they can hold their ground and say, right, you're bringing the fight to me and I'm just going to keep peppering you. So investing in 1 unit might be all right, but you very quickly, if you put a couple in, that becomes your army.
Cool. Okay. Any other infantry squads to take note of at this stage, Alex?
There's 2 more that always, well, in fact, there's 3 more that show up on my radar. One we've briefly mentioned is the cavalry. They're capped at 10 man and they're capped at regular. I think pretty much every Japanese player would love to have veteran cavalry.
Yeah.
But I think the underutilized thing that the Japanese cavalry can do is you can actually buy them on foot with Tough Fighter for only an extra point. So you're getting a 10-man regular tough fighting unit with fanatics for 110 points.
Which is incredible, isn't it? I mean...
Yeah. And again, this is more my style of gameplay. It's the kind of unit that you can get dug in somewhere and it can go and stick out your shots and you don't want to charge it. Because if you're going at the same time, they may be regular, but they're potentially going to wipe you out. I'm not particularly sold on them as a cavalry unit because they are only regular and they start becoming expensive. And if you catch them, they die like regular troops to gunfire. So they can be vulnerable. But the squad on foot digging in, again, one of those missed opportunities we don't see too much.
Having the regular, actually, I quite like that because you're saving quite a lot of points. I mean, 3 points a man. So for 60 points, you got 5 dudes that just run to an objective late game. Or it's only 120 points for 10 cavalry. That's not too bad, Fanatic, because most of the squads you face are going to be smaller than 10. So you're probably going to win the combat. So actually, I quite like that. I think I would run them if I was running Japanese.
Yeah, it's a nice middle ground. You don't typically see large regular squads, but I think For Japan, I think this is the 10-man regular squad of choice.
Oh yeah, lovely. Phil, what were you thinking on it?
I was just going to say, I like that mechanic, and the US have that, don't they? Where you can, I think, is it the veteran squad? So you can pay one point per man to make them tough fighter without having to buy an SMG, for example.
Yeah, the French get it, don't they? On some of, I was just thinking that as we were talking through it, I was thinking this is just like the French, but then I realised the French don't have fanatic. Which is sad.
Yeah. I mean, ignoring the fanatic bit, but I quite like the fact, with Japan and other nations as well, you can pay that additional point, for certain units to add that extra rule, rather than having to pay the 3 points for an SMG, because as you say, that tough fighter squad in cover, which is fanatic, it's not going to shift, or you're going to certainly think twice about trying to shift it in terms of close assaulting it. Yeah, or you might blow it out of the way, in terms of HE, but in terms of sitting on objective and holding it, you're basically saying to your opponent, "Well, come and get me, take me off this."
Well, what's quite nice is if your objective's in a wood, you could put your cavalry on it. If the high explosive rounds start coming in, you could recce behind the wood for a turn and then step back on it the following turn, couldn't you? Which would be quite nice.
Your classic cavalry tactics. That kind of leads quite nicely into my last two picks. It's the mention of SMGs, and that's one thing Japan is notable for not having much of. You look through the army books in Japan, and you get a 5 to 15 man squad that can take one SMG on the NCO, and that's it. And for a fanatic army that likes to be in close combat, it's quite lacking on tough fighters. Aside from the aforementioned cavalry, there's, to my knowledge, only a couple of units that can have multiple SMGs, and that's the IGN scout teams, which you can take at several veteran. I believe they might just be veteran. Yes, just veteran, but you can upgrade them with SMGs. So a little cheeky 3-man veteran tough fighting squads, almost quite similar to the officer unit that you can have with the cavalry. The other is the Taishin Shudan paratrooper squad.
Pardon?
The Taishin Shudan paratrooper squad. They are paratroopers in every sense. They don't have stubborn because they're fanatic and they don't need it, but they can take triple SMG. Again, coming down to those tough squads you can't kill, you sit it in cover, and now we've got 3 veteran tough fighting guys, and you have to chew through the other 5 to 7 men in the squad first before you start killing them off.
Yeah, it's starting to get pricey though. If you're taking 7 of them plus the SMGs, what's that, about 100 points-ish? So they are quite a pricey one, but I can totally see they'd be hard to shift. Yeah,
but you don't mind spending so much in Japan because unlike other armies, when you lose half your squad, there's no chance of you running away. So you're using all of your points. There's no chance that those points are going to be wasted and run off the table.
That's a good point, to be fair, because that squad in cover, I get the hit with the mortar, kill half of them, they don't care. I flame them, they don't care. I shoot them with the rifles and can't hit them because they're in hard cover, they don't care. So yes, short of Gurkhas, they are going to be a really hard one to shift.
Yeah, and if you're too close, no matter what you've done to you, there's a good chance they just banzai out of it and into combat with you.
Nightmare. Brilliant. Were there any other infantry, or was that the top picks?
They're my top picks for Japanese infantry squads. There's special mention for the machine gun squad. The Japanese can take the IGA machine gun section in your MMG slot. So I know people don't tend to take MMGs, at least on the competitive scene, because they can be sniped out. They're quite costly for what they are.
Yeah.
Japan, you can get it as part of an 11-man squad. And if you snipe out the MMG, you've got the rest of the squad still.
Nice. Yeah, that's really good, because that's the big criticism I have. Because I run MMGs, as you know, and the problem I have is every now and then you get an exceptional hit and lose 2 men who shouldn't have been lost, or you get sniped. And so actually, does it start with just 4 men, this squad?
It starts as a 4-man squad, yes.
Yeah. So if the MMG gets sniped and I've still got 3 men who can run around, that's amazing. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, I believe it starts with 4 guys, but they don't have rifles, and all your additional men have rifles.
Oh, that's interesting.
When it's a full-strength squad, it's not just the machine gun firing, but you've got all of that rifle fire as well.
Presumably you can't split fire.
You can't, no.
But it is a good way, isn't it, of getting another, squad-sized unit into your force, especially if you're playing, single generic reinforced platoon. And if you're going down that route of having a lot of bodies, it's a good way of getting even more bodies in.
You've already stuck your 5 militias on the table and thought, how can I just get another 11 guys on the table? Well, there you go. There's a machine gun squad.
Tell you what I like as well, because the machine gun still has fixed, And when you play a machine gun, sometimes it's not in the position you want it. You need to do an advance or a run. And that means it does nothing offensive that turn. But having the blokes with rifles means that actually, even when you're repositioning the machine gun, you could still potentially be putting out a pin each turn. So that's really nice.
It's going to start giving you ideas here, Jonny, because we're talking about, massive amounts of inexperienced units. There's a nice little MMG team as well. We haven't mentioned flamethrowers yet, but, it's ticking a lot of your boxes already.
Oh, 100%. Just having faced Fanatics since the FAQ change, I already had a little bit of, maybe I could play Fanatics. And as we're talking through here, you're absolutely right. I'm starting to think, maybe this is the army for me.
I can hear the hordes of envy starting to hit the painting table.
It's the hooves that I'm hearing. I'm imagining 50 regular cavalrymen just charging across the board. Sorry, 53, because I'll put the officer on a horse as well. Brilliant. So you're not taking the normal machine gun team. I think we can rule that one out.
So as a competitive player, I think I've played a machine gun team once.
Mm-hmm.
I am very much not like yourself, Jonny. I couldn't face ever playing the US with the triple machine gun team, no matter how fun it looks. I would just get so frustrated using it.
So I would never take one, but I take three because they're serving a different function. They're not there as useful units particularly. They're there because you're getting 3 order dice, 105 points, and it's a bit like the other squads you've been talking about there. It's a backline defender because it's still 5 shots coming out. But you're absolutely right. Running one tends to be a waste of points when those 35 points could have gone somewhere else.
And in the case of Japan, 105 points, that's a 15-man militia squad for you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Is there anything exceptional about the mortar teams in Japan, or are they just the regular 3?
Pretty standard, regular, light, medium, and heavy mortars. They are fanatics. I quite often find when I'm playing Japan, people forget they're fanatics, and they'll sneak that 2 little flamer team up to them and then get charged by a mortar team into close combat, and chances are it's going to go your way.
As you found out, Jonny, recently.
Yes, didn't enjoy that.
No. Yeah, my regular mortar team, did indeed take out, I can't remember which squad it was, but...
It was veteran Marines who'd just taken out... So your infantry squad had charged in, the veteran Marines had seen them off, and I was very happy.
That's
I'd
right.
consolidated towards your back lines, and then the mortar came steaming around the corner and took out something like 4 or 5 veteran Marines who'd left.
That's right, yeah.
Which is very, very sad, I have to say. You don't get fanatic when you're down to your last man, though, do you?
You don't, no.
An important note. So if I do flame your mortar team, I'm crossing my fingers and hoping to get you down to 1 man, and then you do have to take your test.
You are indeed, but if you're in range to flame them, that team's in range to charge you.
Yeah, well, hopefully you'll be barbecued by the time we get around to that. Lone snipers was something I wanted to talk about. I don't really understand them. Is what I'm trying. Is where I'm going to go with that.
It's a sniper on his own. That's why it's called a lone sniper.
The thing that I don't understand. That bit I did get, I think, Phil. The bit that I didn't get was he's more expensive than a regular sniper, but you've got 1 less dude. So what's going on there?
He is more expensive, and lone snipers are my go-to when I've been told we're going to a larger event. And I've got my competitive list, and we find out, you know what, we're going to go have fun at this larger event. I say, right, okay, lone snipers, here's the first of the fun toys that we can throw in. So it is a single guy, and I would buy him at veteran, because if you're going to buy a single guy, you don't want him to die easy.
100%.
I actually took 2 of these to Beachhead that I won this year, and I found people would shoot them once and they'd put a pin on, but the lone sniper ignores the first pin.
On that note, sorry, before you move on, he ignores the pin, so when you go to do your fire order, you're not going to do a test, so you keep that pin?
You keep that pin, the pin is still on you, you just ignore it in all gameplay sense. So it allows, when you're facing across the table at a sniper and they take a shot at you, you can guarantee that if they haven't killed you, you don't have to worry about tests to shoot him back. You're there ready. You ignore that pin. You don't have the -1 for not having a spotter. It's not a team weapon, so he has no negatives and he works just like any other sniper. So I think is a sneaky one. And I found quite often at Beachhead, people would shoot them, they'd put a pin on, and then think, well, that's just a waste. And they'd just leave them for the rest of the game. So I'd have 2 snipers, each with a pin on them, just plinking shots away.
Yeah, and are you using them for pins rather than kills? Is that his job role, to sort of keep pinning squads down? Or are you actually using them to try and take out team weapons and stuff?
I think just like any other sniper, it's a unit of opportunity. Anything you can see and you think, you know what, I can take out that unit in a shot if I get lucky. Or I can take out that Panzerfaust. you look for those shots, you can take that opportunity, and he's there. And he's just that kind of cheeky level of resilience that you can't quite just say, oh, and there's a chance you might fail your next test because I've put a pin on you. They sit there. They're tough.
And you can take an LMG, can't you, with your lone sniper?
You can. Unfortunately,
you wouldn't, but you can.
He does have the team weapon rule. So he's then, you've already -1 to your rolls to hit.
But it's very thematic, isn't it? Because they did that a lot, didn't they, in the Pacific, where they'd have often have a guy up a tree with an LMG just hiding away, and then particularly against the Aussies and US and so on, they just take shots out of nowhere, not really sure where it's coming from, and off they went.
One thing to note there is he doesn't get the sniper ruler, does he? When he's got the LMG,
he doesn't know.
I think that does sometimes get a little bit confused by new players.
Yeah, no, you have to be firing your rifle to get the sniper rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not a scoped light machine gun.
No.
This is 1944, 1945, rather than years later,
rather than Battlefield.
Yeah.
Phil, have you tried the lone sniper actually in your few games you've?
I haven't yet. No, I will be, but for the French rather than for Japan, because the Western Desert French force has to be a single. It's called a marksman, but it's essentially the same principle. Mm-hmm. So we'll be using that for the Welsh Open in a few months' time. But I haven't tried the lone sniper yet with the Japanese. No.
So our next unit, I suppose, would be something in the anti-tank flavour. Is that right? Or always making a stop at the flamethrower teams?
They have a flamethrower, just like any
stuff.
Other army. Yeah. They're another of those units. Like a 2-man flamethrower team is more of a deterrent than anything else. And I think Japan, if that's one thing it does, it always deters people from getting close. So you can take a flamethrower and it helps multiply that. But the units themselves do a great job of saying, get within 6 and I'm going to charge you. Maybe not the huge impact that other armies like cheap, regular, in dodge US flamethrowers can put on the table.
I imagine, Alex, it could be quite useful as an anti-tank option. Stick it in a Kuragani and have it running around, particularly if you're not taking armoured vehicles in the tank slots, because they're not the greatest of choices. Yeah,
I mean, that is one thing that Japan suffers with. It has great infantry, but they don't have big tanks, as we'll see when we get there. And a lot of their anti-tank, the reliable anti-tank, is guys that they're going to explode. So you're trading 1 for 1 and you have to get close.
Yeah.
So if you're going to get close with something, a flamethrower is quite a good way. It's the kill-all unit, isn't it? It can walk up to something and say there's a chance you're just going to run away, even if I don't kill you. So yeah, is a safe bet for anti-tank. Anti-infantry,
which is a nice segue into the anti-tank options.
Nice. It is indeed, and the famed suicide anti-tankers,
the veteran ones who've done it many times.
Yes. There's many a time I've had to explain, how can he be a veteran if he blows himself up? Well, actually, their stick lunge mines were magnetic, so you'd run up to a tank, stick it on, and run away. I know in the game the guy dies, but in real life they weren't stupid. They weren't throwing themselves away. They'd stick their mine on and run off. But yeah, it's one of the. It's not a national trait, but it's something Japan has. Is you can take 3 suicide anti-tank team members for each 1 slot, and they range from a 14-point guy inexperienced all the way up to 26 for a veteran. So you've got those levels of, do I want to spam a couple of cheap ones, or do I want to have a couple of really tough single models that I can hide behind buildings and is a threat that you might not be able to kill as soon as you see it, at which point it can see you and charge your tank. There's a bit of choice there in them. Yeah. And I've used them at all kind of levels. It comes down to that list building that sometimes you need to squeeze the points to go inexperienced. Sometimes you're quite happy taking a couple at veteran level. You're
going to trade the dice is the whole mechanic, isn't it? So you need to be thinking, like, is this a useful trade? Equally, it's 3 points in something like sectors if you can just run him in, which is what you did against me. But he behaves like the Soviet dogs, doesn't he, where it breaks the normal mechanic of damage in tanks, where with the Soviet dogs you roll on a table. With this one, I believe if you manage to touch the tank, it's just an auto hit, isn't it?
Automatic strength 8 hit on the front of the tank, plus your roll to add to that. So it can be quite devastating. A lot of experienced players know what they can do, and you never get near their tank with your anti-tank guys. But if they're doing that, they're doing their job. You're keeping the tanks away.
Yeah.
And if the tanks are away, the infantry will play.
Now you can, if you roll a 1 on your damage roll, nothing happens. Is that correct?
A 1 always fails indeed.
Yeah. So yeah, you can hit. You can also hit, but then not damage because you roll a 1 on the damage roll.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Jumping back a bit, in terms of how to use, the suicide anti-tank guys, more often than not, they're going to be for area denial and pushing away vehicles rather than an offensive weapon in themselves.
They are, yeah. You're looking for aerial denial, and this is where the high dice count of Japan starts to come in, that you can take multiple cheap units like the Kemputai and lots of squads. So you build your dice count up, because actually for your anti-tank, what you want is that last dice, almost like a recce vehicle. You want to have the last dice of your turn. You run your anti-tank guy 12 inches. He stood in front of the tank, and then you pray next turn that your high dice in the bag is going to pull it off, and he gets to hit that tank before it opens up at him in panic. They're that denial of you. Don't push up too close, because if I'm last dice, I can run 12 and then another 6. So I've got this really big bubble around me, and it might not just be one guy. There might be a couple of guys hid behind different buildings. So you really have to get squeezed on where is safe.
Tough against things like Stuart as well to use effectively, because you've run into that hail of bullets. I presume the way you're playing it is you're waiting for the tank to activate before you make the charge.
Yeah. Typically, you're, like I say, you're looking for that last dice, first dice combination where you can sneak out in front of it, get so close it can't react, and blow it up. If I'm taking inexperienced ones, sometimes what I'll do is I'll look to I'm within 12 of the tank, but it's going to shoot me. I'm going to charge it because it's going to shoot me. But that Stuart it's what, 130, 40 points for a Stuart has just killed a 14-point inexperienced guy. I've now got a turn where that tank is not shooting my infantry. Which can then just rush up and start doing infantry things and killing things.
Yeah, and something like objectives where the kill dice don't matter. Amazing strategy, because it's just distracted them.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll trade a turn. Yeah, and out of the fear of how easy they are to blow up tanks, you will take those shots or wreck your way.
Oh yeah, 100%.
The other unit of note is the anti-tank teams from New Guinea.
Yeah.
Okay.
A regular or veteran unit. 2-man to 5-man, and they get to forward deploy like scouts. Like the anti-tank, they have a bonus. They actually count as having tough fighters when attacking vehicles.
Interesting.
So they're not going to be outright killing things, because against any enclosed target, they can only do superficial damage. But this is Japan. You're looking at, okay, I can buy another 5-man unit of veteran guys. These guys forward deploy. Yeah, I don't have to go hunting tanks with them, but I've put another 5-man unit on the table. Just keep churning out reasonable size squads.
And out of your deployment zone as well, so they're not going to get the pins in prep. So they're going to be right in your face from turn 1 in missions where you're sort of sat rallying, and suddenly you've got these 3 squads right on your front lines.
More importantly, they're great at hunting down snipers, observers, spotters. Why would I try shooting a sniper when I can just run 4 guys up to him and think, right, next turn, he's going to be charged, and I've dealt with it.
And one of the features of Japan, depending on how you choose your units, is you get a huge number of forward deploying options, which means that when you are doing your setup phase, with your opponent, you can totally dictate, where you're placing your most useful units in terms of your sniper or your spotters, whatever it is, because you're just going to be able to sheer weight of numbers, you're going to be placing yours later than they are.
Yeah, and the suicide anti-tank is great for that. You put all these little single-man models, you can tuck them out of sight behind obstacles so that they're safe. And by the time you've dropped all of yours, the enemy snipers are down, and you can put all your mortar spotters and howitzer spotters and observers and whatever you want. You can put it down in the open and know that they're safe.
Nice.
Brilliant.
Should we talk about some artillery now then?
Yeah, we can do.
Fantastic.
To me, this is the epitome of Japan.
Yeah, well, the one that I really like is, and I don't know if you're about to lead in with this, but the Spigot mortar is my absolute favourite. I did the Mariana and Palau book, 4-inch template, but only strength 1 when it hits. So you're still getting all those hits, but it's strength 1 instead of strength 4. But what it does is it gives you D6 plus 2 pins. So if you're facing shirkers, like those Soviet shirkers we talked about with Mike, they're going to just disappear immediately if they get hit by this. Have you tried one, Alex?
I ran one at the weekend, had a little game around Phil's house. Second time I've ever run it. It only hit once. That's how HE works.
Yep.
Sometimes it only hits once a game. Sometimes it don't hit at all.
The nature of the beast.
It did target a single dog team, a single guy from a single dog team, but that 4-inch template, it overlapped a sniper and it hit them both. took out the dog team and 4 pins on the sniper.
Yeah, that's him out the game for at least a turn, isn't it?
Yeah, he did nothing for the rest of the game. And it's that 4-inch template. It leads to so much potential. You can take a spotter on your spigot. And I think it's a big one. You know, keep it nice and safe. And just keep firing all game. Or just double up the angles you can get with it. Because when you hit, you almost don't need to keep rolling on that target. You can move on to the next one. Because chances are they take D6 plus 2 pins. At minimum, they've got 3 pins. So they're taking at least a turn down on one knee, rallying it off, and that's assuming you're not closing in with other things. So
yeah, and equally, if someone's taken a Death Star unit, like sunk all their points into one big nasty unit, and you're now ranged in with D6 plus 2 pins every turn, you can just keep them out of the game, regardless of how many you kill. And so if they've spent 150 points on that unit and you've paid 80 points for your spigot mortar with a spotter, well, that's good value for money, that.
It is. And it's a 5-man crew as well. A 5-man crew on a fanatic unit. Again, you're going to have to kill them to a man before they run away. So you don't get that. Because quite often in my Germans, I find an HE ranges in on my HE unit, artillery mortar. It kills half the unit and they run away. You don't get that with Japan. They sit there to the man.
Yeah, and 5 fanatics, as you say, it's quite a lot. Phil, you were talking about a unit with lots of crewmen, weren't you?
Yeah, so one of the features of the Japanese artillery, not all of them, but certainly a few of them, is they have much larger crew sizes, don't they, Alex, compared to the equivalent in other nations?
They do indeed. A lot of their units. So the medium howitzer starts with a crew of 6 guys with a gun shield, fanatics again on a medium howitzer. So you pay for it, but you're only paying 5 points a man. So I think that's worth it in my book. The extra crew, they're going to stick around. Like I say, you have to kill them to a man for it to run away. It just gives you so much more staying power. And there's one thing Japan lacks is a lot of long-ranged killing power. So you want your long-range guns to stick around as long as possible. And those extra men, they do that for you. And that leads into a couple of the other options. My favorite being the heavy howitzer. You can buy those extra men. So heavy howitzer starts at 5 and you can buy an additional 3 men, 5 points apiece. 8-man gun is pretty beefy. And if you've got a double platoon, you've got 2 8-man guns. You start shuffling the crew between them. My favorite thing is recrewing guns. You just keep that unit in the game, all game.
Yeah, you've got to keep them all within 2 inches of the breach, though, haven't you? So I imagine it's a bit like playing Twister or something.
You do, but you keep them about 8 inches apart, and you have like a nice little fire base. No one wants to charge them because, again, do you want to charge 8 guys that are fanatic? Probably not. And even if you beat them, then you've got the other gun turns around, shoots you, and then recrews that gun. It's not a healthy prospect.
We've talked about that a lot, haven't we, Jonny, recently, about the ability to recrew guns, and you don't see it very often. And I certainly, talked about it on the pod, having played Alex and having seen Alex play other people. You put your 2 artillery pieces within 12 inches of each other because you've got the larger sized crews as well with the Japanese. It's very easy just to keep that artillery piece back, in the game, even if you've lost the final man, but the artillery piece hasn't been destroyed, you can run another crew member over and that dice comes back, which is exactly what Alex did at the weekend playing Mike to good effect.
Yeah, I believe he killed my spigot mortar 3 times and it came back. Yeah.
Lazarus style, yeah.
To the very end. I mean, I did have 1 crewman on each gun at the end, but it's still a crewman, it's still a gun.
Yeah, and the dice are still there for you, so yeah.
Which is massive in kill point games, being able to keep your dice there.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's enough artillery chat. Are there any exciting tours? I presume they can take a mule team for the low price of 4 points.
Everyone can take a mule team, Jonny. Come on, it's a generic unit for all nations. Why wouldn't you?
Well, Alex, should I?
I think in Japan, yeah.
Okay.
Japan, you're looking for that first dice, last dice combinations. You need it for your anti-tank guys. You need it for your HE guys. Those mule teams, they're quite safe because you've generally put so much infantry on the table that someone has to get past. And they're very unlikely to break through a couple of units and get to your backline. Those single mule teams, they're pretty safe.
Do you use many reserves? So basically, the conversations we've had, summarising sort of the last 10 episodes, the conversations Phil and I have had is, Phil has been very much that argument, and my argument has been, the problem is if I reserve half my units and then I have to put the mule down, I might lose them in prep. But are you using many reserves with your Japanese?
I quite often don't. If I'm running like a flamethrower and a Kuragani, a Jeep, yeah, I'll put that in reserve in prep missions because I don't want that Kuragani to get blown off the table. It's a single model. Generally, you've got big infantry squads, and if you get hit by prep and a couple of pins, you can banzai them off. So actually, you can put most of your army out on the table and know, actually, I'm going to be moving on the turn that you're rallying.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting closer to you, and actually it's in my favor. So I can afford putting a single officer, a Kempertai, a mule team in reserve, and know that actually the bulk of my army is on the table and is operating at fighting force. I know, Jonny, you're very much every unit has to have a use. To me, a mule team is a use. It's upping the chances that my HE gets that first dice, and I can just pile the pressure on from the start.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, for the 4 points, you're absolutely right. An order dice for 4 points is amazing. Like, if that was an option just generally, pay 4 points, get an order dice, we'd probably spend 200 points of army collecting order dice to
all over the place.
Just to bulk the odds in our favour, wouldn't we? And for me, the big thing for me is just I do tend to have a big plan for reserves where the half the things that I go in reserve tend to be things that need to, which means the mule ends up on the table, and that's when the equation swings back the other way for me, where it's like, oh, it's not worth the 4 points to potentially lose it. But yeah, what you said there, I totally agree. I think for Japanese, take a mule team every time.
They've got some interesting toes. The prime movers, the little six-man units that act as toes.
Yeah.
That's all right. When we get onto transports, we can do transports now.
Before you move on to your transports, sir, you've piqued my interest with you saying up to 6 men.
So, well, see, you're not going to like them because you can't put guns on them.
Oh, probably not. But go on, explain anyway.
It's almost like your field cars in Germany. It's your 6-man soft skin. It lets you get your guns around the table.
But it's any gun, though, isn't it? It's not just light and medium. It goes up to as high as you want, which is good.
Yeah. And sometimes you want those Japanese heavy howitzers.
Yeah.
With the FAQ, you can run them on the table, but heavy howitzers, you need to be in that prime spot because once they're on, that's it. They're done. You can't move them. So it allows you having a vehicle that can tow your gun, but you can also do sneaky little tricks. You can load your suicide guys into it and have that vehicle run up the table, and then your guy run out 12, and next turn you've covered half the table in distance, and you're ready to charge a tank with a couple of guys. It could be quite unexpected for people. Yeah,
that's 75% the way across the table, basically. That's pretty scary.
Big moves.
Yeah, and transports generally, what have we got going on there?
So you've got your standard truck. Japan has the light trucks, which as a German player, I miss when I'm not looking at British Army lists. Of an 8-man soft skin truck is actually quite nice.
Hold on a second. Is this a Dodge Carrier?
Again, this is your ideal. It's an 8-man soft skin. You can put MMG on it. You'd love it.
What a treat.
But it's Japan. So you don't want to be sneaking up the table, taking a shot here, taking a shot there. You want your troops up the board, in their face, on foot. So for me and how I use vehicles, they are a dedicated. It runs 24. The next turn, the unit gets out, they shoot stuff. The next turn, they're charging stuff, and you get your infantry, which are your key pieces where you need them. Although I could see you running those an 8-man regular tough fighting fanatic unit in a little Japanese Dodge with a gun.
Oh yeah, 100%. Japanese made Dodge truck.
Very Jonny.
Oh, amazing.
Can you take multiple engineer squads in a generic platoon for Japan?
So for Japan, you can take engineer squads in generic platoon, but you're limited to just one.
Oh, okay. So Jonny can't do his American barbecue list, but with fanatic.
Yeah, he'll have to take the Japanese in his US list if he wants to have that combination.
Got it. I'm quite glad about that, if I'm honest. But
there is a couple which pique Jonny's interest when we come to transports. They are the Ho-Ki and the Ho-Ha.
Ho-Ha.
Ho-Ha, I think, particularly for you, Jonny, is an expensive. It's a 7+ armored carrier for 111 points.
Go on, there must be something to justify that high cost.
So it has a hull-mounted MMG covering your left flank, one covering your right arc, and one covering your rear arc.
Oh, but not the front.
No, not the front. But it holds 13 guys.
Ooh,
okay.
Interesting.
You rush it up the table, you're shooting either side of you, and a big squad of 13 guys gets out in front of it. That's a real dump of things to deal with. and quite a few pins.
Yeah, because you could put 2 of your little SMG squads on that you were talking about with your 3 SMGs in. So 2 of them, 3-man officer squad with 3 SMGs. You bring that either out from behind the woods or in from reserve or something. He puts out 3 pins, and then the 3 squads get out, put out 3 pins. You've now got sort of 3 squads on 2 pins. Very nice. I am a big fan of that, yeah.
If you're really sneaky, you put your engineer unit that you're allowed, your 1 engineer unit with a flamethrower, you put your flamethrower team in it, then you drive your vehicle, it shoots left, it shoots right, puts pins on 2 units, and then you get flamethrowers go out and add to those pins on those units just to double up on the chance they run away.
Yeah.
And then you've still got room for your officer or something else to sit inside, maybe a suicider. That's a real Japanese death style.
Yeah. It does feel like the anti-Japanese army would be a Japanese army at this point.
The one thing of note, though, it's an open-top carrier and you can get pins. You can't banzai out of transports.
You can't banzai out of transports, you say? So?
You can't banzai out of transports. You have to have line of sight to your target. And you can't charge out of a vehicle, which is the main point. You can run, but you have to run towards the nearest visible unit.
I would like to interject, if I may, with an FAQ ruling.
We're coming back to Tiger Fear, aren't we?
We're coming back to Tiger Fear. I know I'm like a broken record here with this Tiger Fear, but Warlord have told me specifically that I can see things inside vehicles, so does that not allow you to banzai out? Because they said, it specifically says, does a unit being transported have line of sight to a vehicle causing Tiger Fear if the vehicle itself has line of sight? And it said, if the transport has line of sight to the Tiger Fear causing vehicle, so have any passengers. So I would say, if you can see a tiger, you can banzai that tiger from inside your transport.
Okay, well, I'll quite happily let me charge out of armored transports.
I was going to say, you
Japanese.
just opened up a whole can of worms there, because we're now assaulting out of transports. Which...
Well, you can't assault out of a transport.
Okay.
But you could run out of it, and that's the key point of being able to clear a pin and get out of a transport.
Okay.
Yeah, I think FAQ is written, rather than rules is written. You can now see units on the table while you're in a transport, which means that the banzai rule says if a Japanese infantry unit is ordered to run towards the closest visible enemy, then banzai. Which means they can now see stuff on the table, so I would have no problem letting you banzai towards me. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to charge, as we said, because of the passenger rule. At least I hope not. Well, I kind of derailed us somewhat there. We'll see if we can get us back on track. Were we talking about the Ho-Ha or the Ho-Ki?
That's the Ho-Ha. The Ho-Ki is your budget version. So 71 points regular. Again, it's a 7+ with up to 13 men. It's a tow. And you can have a Pintle MMG on the front, covering forward arc, and you can put Pintle on the rear arc as well. So not quite the same angles of being able to kind of be that line breaker that really gets in the thick of things and shoots at all the angles. But if you want a cheaper version that still puts out some shots, Jonny style, then that's the armored transport of choice.
Yeah, that's good. That one's like the priest transport, that one. I could see myself running that. That seems like a lot of fun. Having armoured transports, I always find it's not the most competitive thing in the world, but it is quite fun, isn't it, to have an armoured transport where you know your rifles can't hurt it.
It is, yeah. They have a budget Bren. Is the last of the armoured transports, which is the Sodar, which is a 6-man 7+. 57 points. It can't have any weapons on it. It is a Bren that costs a lot and doesn't have that utility.
Yeah,
I was just looking at that and just imagining. Yeah, but then you can only take 1 engineer squad, so you can't do your Brengineers Japanese style.
No.
Well, not you can do 1, and a flamethrower team in the other, but yeah, it's not quite the same.
Yeah. Do they have any 5-man transports with a machine gun on? Because they're usually a really good price point. Like we were talking about the French one, 40 points, 5-man transport, MMG, absolute winner. Are there any of them in here?
They don't. No, Japan goes for the big 13-man transports predominantly.
Yeah,
because that's their big squad sizes, so they want to get as many guys in. They're quite limited in the amount of transport options with utility beyond transporting guys around.
Yeah.
But for me, how I play, that's perfect. Yeah, I want my transport to transport and not pretend it's a soft skin tank.
See, for me, I like a soft skin tank. They're my favourite types of tank.
We wouldn't know, Johnny, to be fair.
Brilliant. On that note, should we talk about some proper tanks then? Because I've heard Japanese have some really proper tanks.
I'm not sure there's such a thing as a tank in the Japanese army. So looking at tanks, for me, there's three, maybe four tanks.
Mm-hmm.
The first, again, it's not really a tank. It's one of my two favorite tanks is the Hago. It's such a dinky little model.
Mm-hmm.
It's your 7+ one-man turret. It's got a low velocity light anti-tank gun, a forward-facing hull MMG, and it's like the Soviets. The Japanese tanks quite often have their machine gun mounted rear facing on the turret. So if you want,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of shoot behind you without turning the turret. But it's one-man turret, so you're having to take those order tests to advance up.
But you can shoot the light anti-tank and the rear gun at the same time, can't you?
You can do, yeah.
So
and
the
way
one
it's
man
actually,
is sort of got one arm on one gun, one arm on the other gun. He's just hosing everyone down.
yeah. He's pressing all the pedals at once.
Yeah.
But it's only 90 points, and it's quite cheeky. You're kind of getting in amongst infantry that can't hurt tanks. It can do some work.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Also, controversially, you could put him in the outflank because that light gun, the low velocity light gun, 3+, you want to be getting in on the sides. If you put it in outflank, it would sort of push the Stuarts towards the middle of the table because they don't know which side is coming in. And then you actually do the stuff you want to do against the Stuart in the middle of the table, like your Suicide AT or your 2 howitzers or whatever it is that you actually were planning to use against the Stuart.
Yeah. Start to bully them with superior Japanese armor. Then that kind of leads you to the middle ground, is the Chiha tanks, the medium tanks. It's the Japanese equivalent. You've got two. You've got your Chiha and your Kai Shinhoto Chiha.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiha is your howitzer version, and the Shinhoto is your medium anti-tank version. And they're in that kind of 150 point range that you'd see a Sherman be. But because it's a Japanese medium tank, you're still only an 8+.
They're like early war Panzer III sort of era, aren't they?
They are, yeah. The Pacific theatre in general was not known for heavy tank warfare. So Japan had quite light tanks. That's quite representative of their armor choices.
Yeah.
However heavy you go, their armor is still weak, so that they never fare well in a tank v tank fight.
Yeah.
For me, the Chiha, having a howitzer on a tank, it just gets you that extra indirect fire on the cheaps. 135 points for an 8+ light howitzer. Rear turret MMG again, if you want to put out lots of shots, and the hull MMG. It's all right. It's not amazing. It's a light tank.
On that note, actually, about maximising your high explosive, one thing of note by its absence is there's no multiple rocket launchers, are there, for Japanese?
There isn't, no.
Yeah, so this is why I suppose taking light high explosives or any high explosives, wherever you can find it, I can imagine has even more value than in other armies.
Yeah, for me, the multi-launchers you see in other armies spread stuff out. With Japan, because it's quite infantry focused, you're not too fussed whether things are grouped up or spread out. If they're grouped up, it just means your infantry gets to hit everything all at once and starts chewing through them. Our games at the weekend, I knew as soon as my veterans got into close combat, they were going to go from one squad to the next. So you almost don't need that multiple launcher of getting things to spread out and take advantage of it, as long as you can get into combat with them.
Yeah. Is your third tank you want to talk about, by any chance, a anti-aircraft truck? Because if not, I think Phil will probably talk at length about it.
Well, my third is again on the subject of HE. If the light anti-tank, light howitzer, from the Chiha, as a medium tank, then you've got your classic assault gun, and I believe there is no better in all of bolt action than the Horo. It's a 7+ armored carrier, but it's got a heavy howitzer on it.
Oof.
Absolutely devastating. 155 points and just rocks around the table. It just, if you can't do a decent tank, why not just have an extra armored howitzer in the army and go big or go home?
Oh yeah, and that's not many more points than having it as a normal artillery piece either. So
It's not. No.
having the ability to push it around if you start getting ranged in on is worth that small points increase. And a 4-inch template, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and it pushes up with the infantry quite well. You can have it running alongside the infantry. Having a tank that can shoot over the infantry is always a bonus. Because let's say we've got our 5-man, our 5 units of militia, we've got our 12-man MMG squad, we've got whole loads of 5-man anti-tank squads. It's very hard to get those direct shots. And you often find this in the sniper slot is if you haven't got elevation, it's really hard to get shots across the table because you've got too many infantry.
Oh, yeah.
So having a tank that just lobs another shot over the top is quite a useful tool in the shed.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'm actually surprised that amongst all that, we didn't talk about the anti-aircraft truck, which I suppose isn't that interesting. Were you choosing yours based on interest or on competitive purely?
A little bit of both. I'm not sure that the Hargo is the most competitive choice, but everyone loves a diddy little tank running around the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a big one for me. My last, and actually my favourite of all the options, is from the Empire in Flames book, and is the SSKI Armoured Engineering Vehicle, which historically, I believe, had 7 flamethrowers on it. When fully tooled out. Now, sadly, Bolt Action decided that we see too many flamethrowers, so it only actually gets to fire 1, but it gets to fire it in a big arc.
Yeah.
And it fires 12 inches.
Yeah.
It fires vehicle flamethrower range. It's a 7+ vehicle. It's enclosed this time. It's not open like the Horo, but again, a little armoured vehicle that pushes up with the infantry. If you've got other infantry in front of you, you're now having to deal with this little flamethrower tank that can push through cover. If you can't hurt it, it's constant there as a threat. The bonus with this, and how I use it, it's got a hull mounted machine gun as well.
Nice.
So quite often what I'll do is I'll rock it on the table and I'll pick my target and I'll put some machine gun shots into that target. Next turn, I'll advance on that target and I'll fire the flamethrower on that unit and I'll fire the machine gun at the unit behind it, because the idea is we've put a pin on that front unit, we flamethrower it off, and at the same time, we put a pin on the next unit ready to keep rolling up and keep just moving through the line. And it's like a slow advancing threat that people have to deal with.
Yeah, and it's really important that it's not open-topped, because things like the Wasp, the problem they have is if they miss, when they get charged, then it's very easy to damage them, because any damage, you don't go to the damage table, it just gets destroyed if it's open-topped. And so it gives it just that little bit more survivability with it being closed as well.
There's one last big advantage with the work vehicle is its flamethrowers. The base model comes with a flamethrower that shoots front and both side arcs. So you can push up to a wall, put it on ambush, and then know that you've got this 24 bubble that people can't sneak by because your flamethrower can see all those arcs. And if you pay 5 points extra, you can have it shooting backwards as well, just to really rub it in.
Yeah, the Suicide AT guy has no line of attack there, does he?
No sneaking up on it. And it's quite a good counter to those Stuarts that sneak around buildings and they're trying to get the side shot on you, or you just put it on ambush and they don't want to come around the corner.
Oh, no, 100%. On that note, actually, now the captured Stuart is on Easy Army as a generic unit, but my understanding is it's not actually a generic unit. It's only for certain selectors, is that right?
Yeah, I believe there's 2. I know Burma is definitely one. I'm not sure on the other off the top of my head.
Phil?
Yeah, it's definitely only in Burma. I'm confident it's only in Burma, but I think there may be a second one. But yeah, it's not a generic option, despite it appearing on Easy Army. Interestingly, so given that Burma was against the British, the option to take the M3 Stuart is from the American book, and therefore you can put Recce on it.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a rarely seen Stuart, the one with the Recce as well.
Yeah, one-upping the British.
As you could imagine, I have, built a Japanese army to the Burma selector, which may or may not include a Recceing Stuart, because why not?
When in Rome?
When in Rome, yeah. I did, though, want to talk about one of the little tankettes.
Yeah.
Which is the Type 92 tankette. So the Type 94 tankette, that's the one that Warlord produced a model for. The Type 92 tankette was earlier. It was from 1932 onwards. It's 90 points regular. It's 7+ armored car with Recce, 1 turret-mounted HMG, and 1 forward-facing hull-mounted MMG. So it is the same price as the little tank that Alex was talking about earlier, the Hago or Hargo. And to be fair, you're probably going to take that rather than the Type 92. But it's a cool little model. And it was used in the Manchurian conflict. So like early, well, it was in 1932, 1933. So earlier on in the 30s. And it was attached to the cavalry division. So if you want to be really thematic, you can have a Type 92 tankette with a bunch of cavalry and your howitzers backing up and mortars and all that sort of stuff.
Nice.
It's worth noting there's actually another Type 92 you could take as an armoured car. It's the 75-point recce MMG and LMG option, so a bit cheaper.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
LMG, so actually you have more shots, but you don't have that pen value.
One of them's wheeled, isn't it? And one of them's tracked. So the one I was talking of is the tracked one, I believe.
Is the tracked,
and
the other one is wheeled.
Is wheeled, yeah. They're quite difficult to find in terms of. I got mine 3D printed, but there's not many manufacturers out there. Certainly, the tracked version.
We were discussing this at the weekend. Japan doesn't have loads and loads of machine gun shots and things because you haven't got those cheesy Stuarts or Panzer IIIs. You find those long range machine gun shots come from your armored car. So having something that can nip around, a bit like the Marmon Harrington, it's armored, it can put out a whole load of shots. Sometimes that is your only choice for kind of long range transport shots.
And because it's a tankette, it's not open topped as well.
No.
Are there any other good armoured cars we should know about?
They're all pretty similar. I'm quite a fan of the Type 87.
Yeah.
Again, it's a 70-point wheeled, doesn't have recce, 7+, but it's 2 twin-linked turret-mounted MMGs. It's nice and simple. It does what you'd expect of it.
Okay.
And sometimes, again, it's almost like that simplicity of Japan of just, it's cheap, basic, and it does what you want it to do for a job.
Yeah. I'm laughing. I'm looking at the Armies of Imperial Japan book, and everyone complains that the Puma, you see more models of the Puma than were actually manufactured. There were apparently 12 of the Type 87 armored cars manufactured in an 8-year period between 37 and 45. So there you go.
And again, that's probably the one I've seen the most on the table, because I've seen you can get models for it.
Okay.
Sometimes that's how we pick unit choices.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, if they're very similar, as you were saying, then you're going to go with the one that's most readily available or the prettiest tank quite often.
I know it goes against what we said at the start, which was Japan is an infantry-heavy army, but I absolutely can see a nice little combo of having the Horo in your tank slot and then having one of these little tankettes in your armor car slot.
They're reasonable points, so you're not paying that 300 points of dropping like a Tiger into your list. So you can actually buy them and still have a whole army running alongside it.
Yeah, that's exactly my thoughts as well, that they get criticised for having bad tanks, but actually what it means is they're very cheap. And so you're getting some firepower for a lot less points than someone who's put the same firepower on a Sherman. So I actually really like the light tanks. And you've got the bodies to protect them as well. That's the big benefit of playing Japanese. Were there any other units you want to talk about, Alex?
I think that's it from me. A big recommendation to go out. If you pick up an army, when you start looking at the campaign books, the Empire Flame book is amazing. You get to learn a whole load about the Japanese-Chinese War, which for us in the UK, it doesn't get taught as much as it should do. There's a whole load of history there that you can pick up at the same time as getting rules for all your core models.
So there's a good recommendation on the theatre books that isn't just Fortress Budapest, which seems to be the one I always recommend. Fantastic. If there's nothing further you'd like to discuss, sir, I guess all I've got to say is thank you very much for coming on to talking us through Japanese. It's one that I don't get to play that often, and so it's not one that I get to see the obscure units of, if you see what I mean. And so having someone talk through them is just really useful.
Johnny's going to go out and buy a whole bamboo horde now and just join the masses.
Horses, that's what I'm thinking. You've sold me on my 53 horses.
I was going to say, Johnny, you probably will get to play with them, or get to play against them coming up in the next few months, because having just painted mine up, I am going to be using it quite a bit.
Oh, good. So actually, what I meant was, it's good to have a guide as to how to be Phil. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Alex.
It's a pleasure.
I guess we'll sign off now. So thank you to anyone who is listening to the pod week on week. Thank you for supporting in all the numerous ways you can and do. and I'll hand over to Phil.
Yep. So big thank you, Alex, for joining us. It's really interesting. As someone who says just sort of starting with Japanese Army, that's going to be really, really helpful to me. And a big thank you to everyone. As always, please do like, share, and subscribe.
Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.